Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to constantly think? Not just the big thoughts like decisions, dilemmas, or daydreams, but the endless chatter in our minds that never seems to stop. It's like our brains are trying to solve life as if it were a math problem, constantly calculating, comparing, planning, worrying. But what if I told you that the very thing we rely on to navigate life, our thinking, is also the very thing that's keeping us from actually living it? Alan Watts, the British philosopher who spent a lifetime exploring the intersection of Eastern wisdom and Western thought, believed that we're addicted to thinking. Not in the productive sense, but in the compulsive, anxious, over-analytical way that leaves us drained and disconnected. He once said, "A person who thinks all the time has nothing to think about except thoughts." So he loses touch with reality and lives in a world of illusions. That's the hook. That's the dilemma. We think because we believe it makes us more in control, more prepared, more intelligent. But the more we think, the more we become trapped in our own heads. And the more we're trapped in our heads, the more we miss the raw, vibrant, spontaneous beauty of life itself. So the question becomes, is thinking helping you or hiding life from you?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Let's go even deeper. Imagine you're sitting by the ocean, and so on. The waves are crashing, the wind is brushing your skin, the sun is warming your face. But instead of feeling it, you're thinking about your to-do list, your email, your mistakes, your future, your past. You're there, but you're not really there. You're caught in a mental simulation. Alan Watts would tell you that this is the tragedy of modern life. We mistake our thoughts about life for life itself. We're like people who confuse the menu with the meal. We read descriptions of joy, analyze the structure of love, philosophize about freedom, but we forget to taste it, or to feel it, to be it. So Watts challenges us, what if the key to happiness isn't thinking more, but thinking less? What if joy doesn't come from understanding life, but from surrendering to it? Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Thinking less? That's dangerous. That's lazy. That's irresponsible. But let's be clear, Watts wasn't advocating for ignorance. He wasn't saying don't think at all. He was saying don't live entirely in your thoughts. Because when you do, you start to believe your thoughts are reality. And that's when things get dangerous. You start believing every fear, every doubt, every criticism that arises in your mind. You become the prisoner of your own mental commentary. But here's the thing, your thoughts are not reality. They're interpretations. They're guesses. They're echoes of your conditioning, and most of them are rooted in fear. So what happens when you begin to loosen your attachment to thought? You begin to feel. You begin to notice. You begin to be. And in that being, a new kind of intelligence arises, one that doesn't come from calculation, but from connection. Alan Watts often used metaphors to reveal truths that words alone couldn't reach. One of his favorites was the idea that we are not separate from the universe, we are the universe, experiencing itself. And when we're constantly thinking, we cut ourselves off from that truth. We reduce ourselves to isolated egos, floating in a sea of anxiety, trying to control everything. But when we stop thinking so much, even for a moment, we re-enter the flow of life. We remember that we don't have to think our way through every second. We can trust, we can breathe, we can surrender. And in that surrender, something astonishing happens. Life becomes lighter, more playful, more alive. You begin to experience joy not as a reward for solving life, but as your natural state once you stop trying to manage every moment with your mind. So ask yourself, when was the last time you were fully present? Not thinking about being present, but actually being present. When was the last time you laughed without analyzing why it was funny? When was the last time you watched a sunset and didn't try to capture it on your phone or translate it into words? That presence, that stillness is what Watts points to again and again. In his lectures, he often mimicked the rhythm of music. He spoke in spirals, not lines. He wasn't trying to deliver bullet points, he was trying to wake you up into the rhythm of life, to the dance. Because life, he said, isn't a journey with a destination. It's not a problem to be solved. It's a song to be danced, a play to be enjoyed, and thinking too much is like trying to analyze the music instead of dancing to it. And here's the twist. The more we try to think our way into happiness, the more we miss it. Because thinking is linear, and life is not. Life is messy, circular, paradoxical. It's full of things that make no sense but feel right, or things that make perfect sense but feel wrong. And if you're trapped in a thought loop, you'll never be able to hear the deeper voice within you, the voice of intuition, of wisdom, of presence. That voice doesn't speak in thoughts. It speaks in silence, in sensation, in stillness. And that's why Watts says the greatest wisdom sometimes comes not from adding more thoughts, but from letting go of them entirely. Let's get practical. How do we actually think less in a world that constantly demands our mental attention? Start with awareness. Notice when your mind is spinning. Notice when you're replaying conversations, rehearsing outcomes, judging yourself. And then pause. Take a breath. Feel your body. Look around, hear the sounds, smell the air. Return to what's actually happening, not what your mind is saying is happening. This is not about suppressing thought, it's about shifting your center of gravity, from the head to the heart, from the mind to the moment. Watts didn't preach meditation as a technique to get somewhere. He saw it as a way to remember you're already here, that you never left. You just got tangled up in thoughts. And when you practice this even for a few seconds at a time, you start to notice something extraordinary. The world becomes more vivid. Food tastes richer. Music sounds deeper. Conversations feel more alive. Even silence becomes beautiful, because you're no longer filtering everything through the mind. You're experiencing it directly. Like a child seeing rain for the first time, not analyzing it, not complaining about it, just feeling it. That's the joy of thinking less. It's not about becoming passive. It's about becoming alive again. Awake, free. And that freedom doesn't come from mastering your thoughts. It comes from seeing that you are not your thoughts. So here's the big question. What would your life feel like if you stopped thinking it into existence and started feeling it into meaning? What would happen if you trusted life enough to stop trying to control every outcome? What if you stopped trying to figure it all out and just let yourself be? That's not laziness. That's spiritual intelligence. That's the wisdom of surrender. And Watts reminds us that surrender isn't giving up, it's giving in. Giving into the flow, the rhythm, the mystery. Because the truth is, we don't know what's going to happen next. And no amount of thinking can change that. But we can choose how we show up. We can choose presence. We can choose joy. We can choose to stop overthinking every breath and start living it. And here's where it gets even more surreal. When you stop overthinking, you don't become dumber, you become wiser. Because your mind becomes quieter, more focused, more attuned to real problems instead of imaginary ones. You become more creative because your thoughts are no longer running in circles, they're dancing. You become more compassionate because you're no longer judging yourself and others through mental filters. You become more peaceful because you're no longer waging war with every thought. And isn't that what we truly want? Not just to be smart, but to be whole. So I challenge you today, right now, pause for just a moment. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and feel what it's like to be alive without needing to define it. Feel what it's like to be you without needing to explain it. That's the space where joy lives. That's the space where true happiness begins. And it's not found in the next thought. It's found in the absence of thought. Letting go of thought is not the same as shutting off your mind. It's not about becoming numb or indifferent. It's the opposite. It's about becoming so present that thought no longer dominates your experience of reality. Alan Watts often spoke of the mind as a tool, a brilliant servant, but a terrible master. We've all experienced what it's like when the mind rules us: sleepless nights, endless worry, self-doubt, and a low hum of anxiety that never fades. We think if we could just think the right thing, we'd finally feel safe. But that's the illusion. The mind promises certainty, but delivers confusion. It promises control, but breeds chaos. And the more we try to think our way out of suffering, the deeper we fall into it. True power, Watts suggests, comes not from controlling thought, but from disidentifying with it, from realizing that you are the awareness behind the thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. When you touch that awareness, however briefly, you begin to see the miracle of emptiness. Not emptiness as in nothingness, but emptiness as the clear space in which everything happens. In Zen, they speak of the beginner's mind, a mind that sees each moment as fresh, unfiltered, and full of possibility. This is the mind that arises when we stop clinging to past and future, when we stop narrating our lives in real time, when we let go of the endless need to label, categorize, and explain. It is in this space of mental silence that the deepest truths reveal themselves, not through logic, but through insight, not through analysis, but through being. You begin to intuit things you could never have reasoned your way to. You begin to respond to life, not react to it. And in that space, you realize something radical. You don't have to think your way to peace, you just have to stop resisting what's already peaceful. This is why Watts often compared the mind to water. When disturbed, it is chaotic, impossible to see through. But when still, it reflects the world with perfect clarity. Most of us are trying to force the water to be still by thinking more thoughts, calming ourselves with logic, trying to fix the chaos with more chaos. But the water doesn't still by force. It stills when we stop stirring it. That's what happens when we let go of compulsive thinking. We allow the natural clarity of our being to emerge. And from that clarity comes wisdom, not the kind that can be quoted, but the kind that can be lived. You begin to trust more. You begin to feel in harmony with life. You begin to see that you were never separate from the flow you just imagined you were because of an overactive mind. The moment you step out of your thoughts, you step back into life. So here's my question to you. What are your thoughts distracting you from feeling? What emotions have you been avoiding by staying in your head? What truths have you been ignoring because they can't be rationalized? We use thought to build walls, but life is asking us to build bridges. Bridges between head and heart, between fear and trust, and between self and other. And those bridges are built not through more thinking, but through presence, curiosity, and surrender. Thinking less isn't about becoming passive, it's about becoming available. Available to the full spectrum of experience. Available to joy, to sadness, to wonder, to mystery. And when you live that way, when you stop thinking about life and start participating in it, you unlock a level of happiness that no thought could ever describe. Because it's not a happiness you earn. It's a happiness you remember. It's been there all along, quietly waiting beneath the noise.